Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last panel of the third day of Winter League. So we are going to be talking about the topic of from scouting to negotiations, the art of closing successful transfer. So here are our guests are Marcelo Salazar, Football Executive Manager from Al Nassr. Please welcome. Welcome. Thank you very much. Yeah, please. Yeah. Our next guest is Matthew Williams, Saudi Sports Consultant. Welcome. Our next guest is Fatih Abdel Gadiel, Regional Association Football Operations, LTT Sports. Welcome, please. And our moderator is Kazım Şengönül, On-Site Assist Sports co-founder and Winter League board member. Welcome, please. So the stage is yours.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to our special guests for coming a long way to join us today. Yes. Our main focus is going to be on Saudi football this afternoon, but before we go on to that, we'll do some introductions. Marcelo, shall we start with you? Okay. You're currently in Saudi, and you are the football executive manager for Al Nassr. But would you like to tell us about your role and how you got there and your history, please?
Yes. So I'm born in Brazil, and my mom, she's Portuguese. How I came to Saudi, to make a long story short, I used to be a pro player in futsal, so indoor football. And my last club, it was in Kuwait, where I finished my career in 2011. So I played for Portugal, Portuguese national team. I played for some teams in Spain, in Belgium. Then I finished my career in Kuwait in 2012. And I knew at that moment that I want to work in football and in professional football. So I wrote my path. I started to get in the licenses. Then in 2016, I started working in Kuwait. 2018, I got my pro license. I got the invitation for Mr. Shamuska, who actually works in Al Taun, Saudi League, to be his assistant in Al Faisali club. Then we joined the club. We did very well during the next 3 seasons. In 2021, we won the King Cup. We beat Town in the final. At that moment, Shamuska, he moves to Shabab. And I got the invitation from Al Nassr president, Mr. Musali, to come to Al Nassr. At that time, Mano Menezes was the manager, the Brazilian former national team coach, Mano Menezes, and I joined his staff. And it was a very complicated period at that time. And then they sacked Mano Menezes. They bring Pedro Emanuel. They sacked Pedro Emanuel after 35 days. At that time, I get the team as an interim coach. I coached the first team of Al Nassr in 5 games in Saudi Pro League. And finally, when we signed Mr. Russo, Mr. Musali, he decides to give me the role of football executive manager to kind of organize and be the link between the foreign coach, the players, because at that time I knew very well the Saudi football inside the field. And of course, bringing a foreign manager that comes to the first time for such a different league, it's a challenge. So I was the perfect link because I speak Spanish, I speak Arabic, I speak French and Portuguese and English.
Wow.
So it's a nice asset. And then we are kind of putting things, organizing things from outside, but with this look of inside the field, of course. And then the rest is, I think everybody knows the history. Rudy Garcia, he joined us in 2022. And then in January, Ronaldo comes in. And from his arrival onwards, I think everybody knows pretty well how it
Yes.
came. So shortly, this is my way from Brazil, from futsal to football, and
To
from
Al Nassr, where you are
Al
now.
Nasser, where I am now. And I recently completed 2 years in this role. And we
But
are
you've been in
talking-
Saudi for 5 years. 5 years. you've
I'm
been
in Saudi
but-
since October 2018.
Right.
So even, I mean, culturally, I have lived, my family is always with me. So my wife, my 2 kids, my daughter, my son, they are with us since then. And we are experiencing the changes. It's not only football, it's outside as well. Football is part of a bigger vision that I think you are going to
We're
speak
going
about.
to go into, yes.
And that's it.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it's quite interesting, especially, the amount of travel, and we've spoken before, the amount of travel that you do. The languages help as well, I guess.
Yes, of course.
That was quite impressive. I mean, thank you very much for your introduction, and it's a pleasure having you here. Matthew Williams.
I know, what a person to follow, right? I struggle with English. Don't worry about the 5 languages this guy speaks, but yeah.
You are a private Saudi football consultant, but your journey began in England, and now you're in Saudi for the last
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Would you like to just give us a history of yourself as well, please?
Yeah, I feel a little bit like a traitor, really. I was an ex-professional rugby player. So for me to be on a stage
There's a transition
in
there.
a football environment is quite scary for me, in all honesty. But yeah, so my background was, as I say, I was very fortunate to play professional and international rugby. Then went through the kind of the same route as any player that steps out of the game, that goes into coaching and then development. And then was a part of what has been a big transition of rugby clubs in the US, so from Washington, D.C., from Toronto, and then ended up in the Bahamas as the director of sport. But whilst doing that, I was also running and being a part of legacy programs for the IOC, Commonwealth Games, IAAFs. Has been a huge part of my passion is building legacy and community projects for organizations. And then, as we know, that really big cough and flu thing came around that kind of made all of us internally probably reflect about where we're going, what are we doing. I went back to the UK and had a friend of mine working for the SOC, so the Saudi Olympic Committee, a gentleman called Matt Favier, that was the high performance director of Team Australia and then UK Sport England, and said, look, you've got to come to Saudi. Something really exceptional is going on here. It's a great opportunity for you. And then explored that like we all do and try and find out what's the best way to go. And over the last 2.5 years, I've been very much involved with that development for corporate, for federation, for club, in a multitude of different factors. And then at the moment, as I say, probably over the last 12 months, very much cemented in football and the privatization model that I think we will come on to later.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a very exciting time. I know there's some people in the room here that have had actually maybe more experience than all of us in Saudi, and some that are in the Saudi market. So I hope this panel will enable us to talk about that. But also, before I hand back, just a massive thank you to everybody that has put on this conference and given us the opportunity to come. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you very much for going through that and just running us through your history. And it's always interesting to hear that everybody's experience is different, but where we are now. But you mentioned, I mean, I'm going to cut to you in a minute, but before we go on, it's not just football. You work on other sectors as well, like other sports.
You've stolen my byline there, right?
But I'll tell you what, we'll come to that. We'll come to that.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, we were just talking about it off this conversation, that football clubs in Saudi Arabia are very different to what you would see in England, where your Manchester Uniteds and your Newcastles are solely just football. Mm-hmm. Within Saudi Arabia, we have an obligation to help and support other clubs. So, if you look at, I don't know, Al Qadsiya, Al Hilal, Al Nasser, these guys will also have futsal, they will have table tennis, they will have... So when we're talking about Saudi Arabia and we're talking about opportunities for companies here in Turkey, we're not, as much as this is a football conference and we're focused on football, the opportunity is if you are a psychologist or you're into DNA testing or you're into high-performance sport, not only is Saudi Arabia developing in football, but, we want to be giving opportunities to all Saudi boys, girls, and expats to develop as athletes in Saudi Arabia.
Brilliant, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for that, and again, welcome. Fatih, Regional Association Football Operations LTT Sports, which is a Swiss company, is that correct?
Yeah, that's true.
And but you're based in Saudi
Yes,
as well.
that's true as well. Yeah, in
Would
Jeddah.
you like to give us your history as well, please?
Well, first of all, thank you for Winter League community for being here for the second year. So yeah, my story is really growing. Maybe before I born, because my grandfather used to be Ittihad Jeddah club president in the 60s, followed by my uncle and my father. They were in charge during the 80s. My father was the vice president. So I born actually in such a football environment.
There's a history there.
Yeah, a history there. Yeah, so like no pressure, kid. You don't have no pressure. So it comes actually that I started to follow football since 4 years old, something like that, and keep on growing. Well, that's and yeah, after the by university time, I was starting actually to trying to purchase career within sports industry back then. I finished my high school at 2013. So back then, sports diploma management, sports management really courses was really not familiar as the current moment. So I started doing my aviation back then in the beginnings. And after finishing a private pilot license, I have seen like reviewing football courses and sport management courses. And back then, I see a good course about in Brussels University about football management. So it was a master's dedicated only for the football management. And back then, I've applied over there. It was a 1 year intensive course. So and then since then, yeah, my knowledge about football was really not like a fan who just watch the game and that's what's happening on the pitch and that's it. No, it really grow up that there is many things happening behind the scenes. On those 22 players are really playing on the pitch. And after finishing my masters, I've been involved with the AFC, with the Social Responsibility Project, back then called eGoal, and it was really about for youth development ambassadors. So they gather up the under 17 captains of all under 17 captains in Asian Confederation to teach them about how they could be leaders since the beginnings, and then afterwards, I keep on social responsibility. I've been involved with parafootball, which is disability football operations, for 1 year. And since then, I've joined LTT Sports.
And when was that? How long
Yeah.
ago was that?
Yeah.
How long you been with them?
Yeah, now this is almost 2 years now.
2 years.
And yeah, with LTT Sports, I actually found myself to do what I really studied, what I really seen in the university. So with LTT, actually, what we are doing, we're doing services for clubs, FAs, and the leagues. For clubs, we did club strategies for many European clubs to give them advices how to be still in the leadership across many areas of the game. Because of course, everybody here knows that it's really not just about the pitch. Also, league benchmarking. We do many benchmarking studies for leagues to increase their revenues from the sports and non-sports activities. For football education, we have been organized the first ever football executive education program in football. That was back in 2018. And also, we did for youth development. We did the first ever youth studies about the best youth academies in European continent. For women's football, our board was really involved in transforming the Women's Champions League to be on the current form that's really beneficial for the clubs and really encourage the clubs that to see the Champions League now having the exposure and the big teams joining. And finally, we do a governance studies for outside football for some of EU member states.
Thank you.
And since then, I've been involved in many operations. I've been responsible actually to expand the company operations in the Middle East since the last year, since it started to be a key market. It's really started from the World Cup, and then it's followed and keep growing. And then I've been involved for Arabic Club Management Guide, which is a guide about how you can manage a football club, how you can run a football club from a managerial perspective, not only a sporting perspective. And after that, I've been involved also within a global football report, which has been published 3 months ago. It was about football in 22 emerging countries outside European continent. And yeah, lastly, African football landscape report. It was about football in African clubs and the potentials of the African clubs and the African Super League that started in the last year.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Obviously, now our panel is all based in Saudi Arabia, and we're going to go deeper into it. I think the best way to go into that conversation is the Crown Prince's Kingdom Vision 2030. There's obviously a lot of work going on with regards to that. I mean, we'll come to you later on with regards to this as well, but there is a history with Saudi Arabia trying to push football forward, which goes back all the way to the 80s. However, this time around, it seems to be very strong, and the Crown Prince is quite ambitious when it comes to the Kingdom Vision of 2030. Marcelo, what are your thoughts on this?
Football is a part of the project. The project is much bigger than only football. And as you said, Saudi is a nation that has tradition in football. They had big names before, but today we have to acknowledge that we live in an era that with social media, the information it's immediate. So everybody knows that Ronaldo is here, that Benzema is in Etihad. From the moment that the news it's spread, everybody starts to look to Saudi Arabia. But again, the project, it's very sustainable. They will have a World Cup in 2034. So they have to build a squad from now to play in
The national team.
10 years.
Yeah.
Yes, the national team. So it's not only the first league. There is the second league. There is the third league.
Yeah.
There is the women league. There are the youth competitions. National teams, they are playing all around the world to get the players the international experience thinking in 2034. So the vision is very ambitious, and it goes beyond high performance football. And I think
there's
Matthew speaks a lot what's the goal behind with encouraging people to play, to practice, but it's much wider than only football.
And there's a lot of resources going into it. It's not just, it's not just a vision that's left for planning. There's a lot of finances going into it. There's a lot of, tourism that's involved. I mean, Matthew, the vision going from now to 2030 with 188 clubs, currently professional 188 clubs in the country, the Crown Prince is, with the vision, looking to anything up to 800 clubs. Do you think that's ambitious, or do you think it's achievable? Maybe not as much as that, but I mean, a few hundred clubs is going to be difficult over the next 7 years. But do they have the facility? Well, they've got the facilities, but do they have the finances of the people to actually achieve this?
That's a very good question for me. Thank you. So I was very fortunate to spend some time on stage in another conference with the architect of NEOM. And if you guys have had a chance to have a look at the Red Sea project or the line or anything like that that's going on in Saudi Arabia, the first thing that I thought when that was put out was, this is nuts. This is not going to be possible. And the architect turned around to me and said, if it's possible, they wouldn't have picked me. And I think that is probably the aspiration of where we are, is that we don't want to have a target that we can easily hit. We want something that really drives us forward. And going back to 2034, I think when any country in the world has their own focus, it's very easy. When you go and win the opportunity to hold a World Cup, everybody in this room should be getting massively excited about how much investment opportunities there are now in Saudi Arabia to grow in a multitude of factors. So if that's, we now need to build state-of-the-art stadiums, we need S&C that you'll see in here. We've got great companies being able to do that. We've talked about tourism. So a number to say how many the clubs are going to grow, I think it's more about that as a country we want to increase participation. And to align that with an aspirational target is definitely a shot. And I think everything we do is aspirational. I think if maybe 4 years ago you were to say in Saudi Arabia you would have Ronaldo, you might have Messi, you will have Neymar, you will have Benzema, sat on this stage, I think some people would say, no, it's not possible and it's unachievable. But I think with good governance, with good understanding, and with the importance of how sport has helped increase Saudi Arabia GDP by 1%, we will continue to help and support Saudi develop Saudi athletes to achieve that. So if that becomes a number that we hit or we don't hit, I don't think that's the measure of the success.
Yeah.
I think the measure
But
of
it's
the
something
success
to aim
is
for.
Absolutely, and I think it's the measure of success of growth as well. And I think one thing we were talking about before is don't get confused that that number is aligned to football clubs. That line is to sports clubs, sports
clubs.
opportunities for Saudi, and that's. I don't know if you guys have seen the Saudi Games, but if you don't know what the Saudi Games is, if you win a gold medal in that as a Saudi participant, you win $1 million riyal, £250,000. So we're trying to incentivize people to become more active, to become more passionate. And by the byproduct of that is you will need more clubs. You'll need more organizations. And also you will need more private organizations to be able to achieve that. So that's how I'd answer that one.
Thank you. I mean, I was in Saudi, as you know, recently, and I've seen a lot of changes from my previous visit to now. And obviously, if you're going to draw a lot of attention on you, and you are looking to improve, and you're looking at a very big vision, then you have to be able to adjust certain things. And I think Saudi's really, really doing that well at the moment. With regards to the World Cup, I mean, we are talking about 2034, where it's going to be host, and that is part of the project as well, the national team. What are your thoughts about the national team, Fatih?
Well, for this, I see now. We all see a major hopes, a major investments, and very sky-limiting hopes about having a good national team and to be ready for 2034 World Cup. And that really needs to keep on the high momentum of this moment, and to not lose this moment, because it's really long-term project. So you need to keep the high momentum from now until the World Cup, and really to keep it, you really to work on both aspects. Yeah, it's really more about sports project, but my expertise is really about football. So I will speak about the football perspective and how it can be. So from that perspective, what I see. First of all, you need to work two aspects. The first one is the executive aspects. So this is how it should be, or how it can be, is working with all clubs to have a fully professional ecosystems. And this need to encourage the clubs to be run fully professionally, and to be really like having a top executives in each of the clubs. And each clubs need to have it like tailored on their really strategy, to have all of this. And in Saudi Arabia, it should be the responsibility of the two professional leagues, the SPL for the first division and FDL for the second division. The other one that really Saudi Arabia should be work on to really exploit the massive signings and the top signings that really have it now, and to really have a fingerprint of this signing onto the national players signing, is to have investing into the grassroots and the youth development programs. That's why to transfer the expertise of those mega signings to the national players. And what I can really agree with, that Saudi Arabia has really started to investing in both aspects since actually 5-6 years ago. So if you see the structure of the top level organizations in Saudi Arabia, you will find already a really top level executives, and we have one of them here. Marcelo is here. One of them. You have them really in the managerial levels of the, for example, Saudi Football Federations, the league, and actually for the grassroots level, we have two youth development programs. One of them is Saudi Future Falcons, which actually having the best young players in Saudi Arabia, in the kingdom, and have to train them to play abroad for abroad camps. Also, we have school leagues School leagues is really about gathering the best of the school players of each region, each province in Saudi Arabia, and scout on them the best of them to join actually the Saudi Future Falcons programs.
Well, to actually enable these projects to happen and the youth to get involved, there's a lot of private investment as well, isn't there, Matthew? The currently 188 clubs, 8 of them are private. Is that correct?
Yeah, 8 are private, and I think that's continued to grow. I think the idea is it will be possibly the discussion that is open source is that will go to 14. And I think going back to one of the key things that we've talked about here that's probably prevalent to all of you people in the room is that it's very good to have a Northern Star that doesn't move. And I think that a lot of other federations don't have that. Things are caught up in politics. They're caught up in every 4 years you create change. So initially there's a vision, okay? And then why are private clubs going to help benefit that? Well, for you guys that don't know, most of the clubs in Saudi Arabia that are with the Ministry of Sport owned, they get a certain amount of funding every year. And that funding is set for, you have a sports club, you hit these KPIs, this is your funding. Then if you can hit extra KPIs, you get extra revenue. But with the vision of where we want to go and the players that we're now attracting, those finances aren't going to be something that's going to be sustainable. And I think the key thing that you'll talk about, I'm sure, later is China versus Saudi. Sustainability is probably the big thing, So what we need to do is we need to have the companies like NEOM, Alula, Saudi Aramco to be involved. And also what you get with that is a very different look on football. And Marcelo probably will be able to explain this because he was involved in a club pre-PIF and then PIF, is to understand that when these organizations come in, they have a very clear way of running their operation. And that can be hugely helpful for football. There can be debilitating factors as well, we know that. But as I say, I think for us to achieve what we want to achieve as a country, if we look at the current league, you would probably say that there's 5 teams that are ultra competitive in that top league. How are you going to close that gap? And you're going to close that gap by private organizations investing in Saudi Arabia with possibly more than the 40, 50 million of money given to be able to drive that. And you're seeing that now with the likes of Alula, NEOM, Al Qataria Aramco are progressing in their leagues from last year to either being in promotion positions or in a position of strength.
Thank you. Going on to the finance support and everything, Marcelo. I mean, Al Nassr, a big transfer. It's a huge amount of money, but obviously, with regards to going forward, is that an investment for Saudi on its own, the club? What are your thoughts about that?
It goes beyond. It goes beyond. The impact that Laporte, Brozovic, Sadio Mane, Cristiano Ronaldo, Benzema, Riyad Mahrez, Malcolm, Mitrovic, all these guys goes much beyond football. It goes like we are bringing role models to really inspire young guys.
Inspiration and drawing the eyes.
Yes, it's what Matthew said. If you have a vision, you go towards something, and they have our players. They used to have before big names and great professionals, but again, it's one level above. And it's an opportunity for them to be daily. We have some young guys, under 19, under 17s, they come to train with us, and they have the opportunity to share a changing room and to see what they eat, how they train, how they prepare for the training. And this is what lead them to be where they are now. And if outside performance football, we are developed 800 sports clubs. So, of course, a change of culture is not like a player. We sign a player today, tomorrow the player is in the field performing. But a change of culture, a change of infrastructure takes time. But if you have vision, you have models, and you are consistent, soon or later, you will achieve. And the vision is clear, the role models, they are there, and there is no other possibility than achieving. Then in a long term, keeping this consistency, you will achieve. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but you go in the right direction. Kazim, just let me give you one data that you spoke about the national teams.
Of course. Please go ahead.
In July 2023, there was the Pan-Arab Games that was played in Algeria. And Saudi, they sent the under-21 team to play this competition, which is Olympic. It's under-23, and they won. It means the basis they are that these guys, they are 20. So in 10 years, they will be 30, 31, 19, 29. So probably many of these players, they will be representing Saudi. And they are already, since the early stage, playing and being challenged above their actual level, because it's not the same who has experience of playing football or playing any sports, 2 years at this stage makes a huge difference, or sometimes 3. So between 18 and 23, it's 5-year gap, so it's really hard. So they have been challenged above their actual level, and it makes part of the plan as well to do well in the World Cup. They already did amazing in Qatar. They beat Argentina.
Yeah.
And
We won the World Cup. We're the only team to beat Argentina.
yes.
And we got a day off.
See?
This is the best news I've ever
That
seen.
can't
huh?
be bad. That can't be bad.
I'm
That's
English.
brilliant.
We've been waiting for a day off for years. It's been coming home for like 50 years. It's not come home yet. So.
And if you get
Crazy.
World Cup in 2018, the first game, they were beaten by Russia 5-0.
Yeah.
And in 2018, it's when they put the number of foreign players from 4 to 7. So in these 4 years, we can see it was almost the same generation, but 60% of the team was the same. So from being beaten by Russia 5-0, they beat Argentina in 4 years. So I think there are enough data to support the fact that the development it's happening.
It's not just the clubs. It's not just a couple of clubs that aren't getting the support or getting the finances. That's affecting the national team, obviously, because you've got homegrown players that's getting the opportunities. And I think there's a restriction on that, isn't there, as well?
Yeah.
The amount of homegrown
I think the other
players.
thing that's really important for us to understand is that when you bring in, so a lot of the clubs pre-Cristiano Ronaldo, some of these professionals, okay, their glass ceiling of what they believe is a normal way to train, a normal attitude, maybe isn't where it is now. And I think we forget that. So you bring a Cristiano Ronaldo into your football club, and your professionalism changes instantly. Your culture takes time. But when a young player sees a specimen, in my view, like Cristiano Ronaldo, in the gym early, doing extra, doing sleep cycles, doing this, the maybe average Saudi player that you can attest to probably more than me, that maybe doesn't really understand diet and nutrition and think that Capsa is healthy, that it's wonderful, but it's maybe not that healthy, and that I need to go into the gym. And what I've seen with a lot of the statistics that I've been privy to is even Saudi players now in these top clubs that might have been anti-gym, anti-this, are now buying into understanding their bodies a lot better, developing that, and that has a cascade, right? That will transcend down to these younger players.
They've got a role model.
I
right
now
in front
want to
of
be a
them.
superstar. I need to put the time in. I need to put the work in, and then you get a cultural change because now the coach isn't having to force because you've got these role models delivering that. And I think that we sometimes take that for granted, but I'm sure that Cristiano is having an imprint on Saudi football, not just because he has a trundle of Instagram followers and he's amazing, but that guy's standards, the standards are the standards you walk by, right?
Yeah.
This guy is lifting the ceiling for all of that. And I know in one club that came actually to Turkey pre-season, and I was here to witness this, was that all the Saudi boys just doing keepy uppies, kicking the ball, and we're like, well, this looks like village football, right? Great, fantastic. 2 signings come from foreign countries. They come, they're foam rollering, they're doing their proprioception, and everybody's looking, going what's that about? And then 3 days later, now the strength and conditioning coach has got all of the Saudi players doing exactly the same. So when you're talking about changes and you're talking about investments of all of these players, we must understand that investment is there to be seen instantly as well as long term. So that's where I think we are going to progress, is that the more of these great inspirational players that we bring in, yes, there's probably 7, 8 different boxes that they tick, but for the local Saudi player, 18, 19 international, it's on now. We've got to work hard to get to where we've got to get to. Because also there's no space. 4 international players, you need a lot of Saudis.
Yeah.
7, 8 now. You've got to be ultra competitive and you've got to be pushing really hard to get your spot.
The inspiration is there, but it also needs to continue. So you need to keep on bringing those inspirations in until you get to a point where, you know, you've got the homegrown players that's becoming that inspiration also.
Well, Marcelo, also you testament to the restructuring of the international teams. I don't know if you want to allude on that with the age groups and how that's changing as well, I think is a testament to this.
Yes, the Saudi Football Federation, they hired Mr. Nasser Largué, which is a French national, that he was behind the change of the Moroccan Football Federation. So what Morocco did in the recent World Cup began earlier, and Nasser was one of the architects of this, of what happened with the Moroccan national team. And Saudi, they signed him, and the first thing he established once he came 2 years ago, it was to establish one national team, Saudi national team, for every year. So they have 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, Olympic. So for each one head coach, all of them working in the same place, all of them sharing more or less the same strategy. Of course, each one as a coach has his tactics and so on, but they share scouting. No. So it's much more integrated because Saudi is a huge country. So bringing also data to the national team and playing abroad. They play a lot abroad. So Nasser is very well relationed. And he makes the guys and the young Saudis, they travel to play in Europe, in Africa, in Asia. So they are constantly playing. And this is something that attests, again, that there is the vision and there are actions that are going for this vision.
Yeah, I mean, we were all impressed in the World Cup. And this is what obviously Saudi is working on as well, going towards 2034. There is a plan and there is a vision there. It's not just the clubs, the investments, but the national team is also part of it. But with regards to the future, I mean, we're talking about the future as well. Fatih, what are your thoughts? I mean, we've seen China have a go at this, where they brought in, you know, players that would draw the attention on them, and it didn't really pan out, it didn't really work. But I think Saudi is doing it and they have a different philosophy with regards to this. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, for that, what I really
looking at
wanted
the future,
to at future, really, I really want to get something from the past, just to give an overview what is going to the future, because it's really not come out of a sudden that Saudi Arabia wanted to develop football. It's happening actually back to the 80s. It was first ever professionalization era in the country. And back then, the government had built over 14 stadiums across the whole Saudi Arabia region. And also for top division clubs, they built a training and a multi-sports complex. And then over that, empowering clubs to acquire top quality players back in the 80s. For instance, for example, we have Mario Zagallo. He used to coach in Saudi Arabia. We have Dietmar Kramer from Germany. He used also to coach in Saudi Arabia. We have Thomas Schaber from Sweden. We have Revellino, the Brazilian legend, used to play over there. And such a way of development really encourage the top community personalities to take over this ecosystem and to invest in the ecosystem, which is somehow look like a professional ecosystem. And it really works until the 2000s. And then after that, in 2018, they started to implement the new governance regulations to keep over developing the players. And back to the past, when they do that at the 80s, they empowered and they generate a golden generation in the 80s that really dominates the Asian football back then with 2 consecutive Asian Cup. Also, Saudi Arabia is the first ever Asian national team to win a FIFA World Cup. That was the under-16 FIFA World Cup in Scotland in 1989. So this is just an overview that why it's really not like China. It's something in the DNA. And if you look also over the Saudi clubs, you will see that the latest Saudi clubs in the top division, the majority of the top division clubs, the latest Saudi club that been established, it was almost half of the decade, 50 years ago. So that's really the overview how football is an identity in Saudi Arabia, not just like acquiring mega players or just keeping on or having fans on the stadium, just have a good entertainment.
It's certainly. I mean, the way that Saudi Arabia has started this project and the way that they're drawing the attention in, it's certainly making waves.
Yeah.
I think we've all seen that, and we are very much looking forward to seeing just how far it's going to go over the next 10 years. And
Sure.
so thank you very much. Before we come to the end of our panel, I think we'll go to questions, see if there's a couple of questions that we can pick up.
Yeah. Can I just start my questions?
Sorry?
I have a question. Can I
Yes,
start?
of course.
I start to Marcelo about
please.
Al-Nasr club. It's about
He's been
Al-Nasr club.
practicing this all week. You're in trouble.
It's really about Al-Nasr club. Yeah, a lot of Saudi clubs actually have acquired good players, but we have seen Al-Nasr and Al-Hilal players are really doing great job. My question here is really how Al-Nasr have doing this chemistry between the team, because the Saudi players and the foreign players, they are all playing as a one team and performing very well on the pitch. So I think, of course, because of Ronaldo, the viewership is really high. But this season, if anyone want to watch a Premier League game, they really enjoyed Al-Nasr style of play and how they are playing. I just want to ask, I'm curious really about the secret of having this style of play and this spirit in the team. And I really, the first championship in this season was the Arab Club Championship. And Nasser have won it with 8 men, although they were 1 man down. With their 1-0 down, and they won with 8 players. So
I don't think Marcelo can go into the tactics side of it or anything like that. But briefly, would you like to?
This is a new style of them. They only train with 8, so specific training.
Yeah, building relationships takes time. So merging foreign players, and I don't think it's only one problem in Saudi clubs. Everywhere, if you get any team, the teams become more and more internationals with people from different backgrounds. But yes, Saudi it has its own culture and it's like a unique environment. So as I said previously, being there since 2018 makes me understand what are the struggles of professional players, not only them, but their families, wives, kids, because I was through these struggles in 2018 when things were much more harder than they are now, and I wasn't in Riyadh in a small club. So, and I'm not talking about Marcelo personally, but it's like the club. We have most of our local players. They have been there in the last 3-4 years, and they're really together. And we know how to welcome the players, because I think one of the secrets, it's in one side, you receive well who's coming to your club, but also who's coming has to be smart enough to be well received. And this is something that sometimes it's a small briefing when you are dealing with them, explain some situations, putting the family on the discussion, because at the end, if things doesn't work very well here,
yes,
it might have some impact on the training ground. And but yes, I think we are
the family
very,
needs to be involved as well. It's not
yes,
just-
always.
But I think this is the importance of somebody like Marcelo's role in a football club. That, it's always a question that's asked, what is the role of an executive director or this or that? But I think that, Marcelo talking off here, that, you need to work out exactly what your DNA is and who you're looking for. And is it always the best player? No. But is it the best person? Then yes. And how are they going to fit into that environment? And I think that there's certain clubs that do overlook that. And you can bring in certain personalities that can be very, very destructive, and it doesn't take long. But I think having the depth of experience that Marcelo has, not just at the top, but all of the clubs in Saudi, and also being in Saudi probably pre-COVID and through COVID, it's changed. And anybody that's been there, I mean, there's people in the room that have coached in the Olympic team that have been there in 1998. If you to come back to Saudi Arabia now, it's a very different looking Saudi. It's a very different landscape.
It myself
women driving, you can talk about a multitude of things, right? But I think that's a really key point. But I think it's a key point that the success, to your answer, is not just saying solely Marcelo because he's here, but joking aside, is having these kind of people that can manage those small things that make a huge difference to a family relocating, you know, where the kids are going to school, is everything okay? It's all great when everything's going well, but you need, I think, you know, these executive directors making sure that these small 1-2% can make a huge difference.
Just to summarize, Fatih, build relationships. This is the secret. You have to build relationships in your team, as in your business as well, like everywhere. And creating the environment to foster these relationships to be built. So it's not only, okay, let's build. No, how? There are things to do that, I mean, I will not extend, but you can manage the environment in one way that the relationship, they will be built naturally.
And time is needed to do this. You know,
Of course.
you need time to transition.
Of course, there is no miracle.
And unfortunately, in the modern days football, and opportunities are not given to managers as much as players in some sense, because managers at the moment, you know, you could have 2 or 3 managers in one season. Yes. And that to me is not enough time for transition. So if you're building a club, you're allowing the time to go through the process to build, but why isn't that time given to managers? I mean, totally different topic perhaps, but in relevance to it.
That could open up a forum for a completely different day.
we could actually,
but going back to that, you know, like, you also have to look at Marcelo and understand that there's, you know, he's seen a lot of people come and go at that football club,
yes.
right? You know, and I think that's testament to him that, you know, the organization have trust. And I think one thing we would all agree, that if you want to succeed in any of your businesses, if any of your landscape, if you're agents, if you're selling product, or you want to work with Saudi, and I know this sounds, it's given everywhere, but the market is done on trust.
Yeah.
And, you know, from knowing Marcelo now for a while, you know, he's considered in very high regard, and he's done a multitude of jobs in that organization. I mean, to run a football team for 5 games, I mean, you know, do you know what I mean? But that's what Saudi is. If you can gain the trust, then it's great. And I think that's probably, to answer your other question, that's where others fail, is they maybe don't engage that trust in that same way. And that's the success of this gentleman being there for a long period of time, I'm sure.
That's not an easy job, you know, to be able to pick things up where somebody else has left off and move away from your own role and responsibilities to take over, and then go back to your role and oversee things. It's not an easy, you know, it's not an easy job at all, but thank you. We'll go on to a couple of questions, if that's okay. Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for these interesting insights about Saudi football. My name is Elchin. I'm coming from Azerbaijan Football Federation. And I have a couple of questions. First of all, about players. Definitely the performance of the national team during the last World Cup, and especially arrival of such an international players, which we normally used to see in the UEFA Champions League for many years, brings a great attention to the country and the football. So my question is whether it is decision of the club management or league or federation or ministry or governmental vision, or it's all combined? So who decides which players in which club come? And the second question, how do you see the future, because Saudi Arabia is the member of AFC, Asian Football Confederations, and club compete for international titles, obviously. So how do you see generally Asian club competitions in the future? Thank you.
Marcelo.
Yeah, so for the signings, it has been changed. Matthew, as he said, the clubs, they receive certain amount from the Ministry of Sports, and they are free to deal with whatever they want. This is back to 2018. The league, they were supporting each club with 2 players, and this can vary through the seasons. Recently, for this summer, SPL, which is the Saudi Pro League, they had a committee, so they have to see, okay, who is the player is going to add value to the league. So this is what happened in this summer. And then for each club, there are different ways. For example, Nasser, as you might know, Nasser, Hilal, Ittihad, and Ahli, they were bought from PIF, which the Public Investment Fund. So they own 75% of our club. But there is a board, there is governance, there is a compliance, there is executive committee, and then we report each one on his own case. I'm talking about our club. But yes, probably in other clubs it's a little bit different, as is all around the world. If you are private owned, if you are like a social club like FC Barcelona or Real Madrid, or if you are a British club or a German club, for example, they cannot have a private owner more than 51%. So it's a little bit, it's not the same for all of them, but these are some of the ways that has been done since 2018 when I joined the Saudi League. The second question, it was about how we see the Asian
club competition.
The club competition, we see in the last years that Saudi clubs, they are very strong in the region. Now all the 4 clubs, they are, even we had the case of Al Faisali, that they qualified in 2022.
The last edition.
They qualified for knockout stage and they were relegated in the Saudi League. And in the group stage, they were with Jazeera and Al Saad from Qatar, for example, which are big clubs compared with Al Faisali, if we speak about titles and so on. So it's another proof that bringing such good players increase the average level of the local players. There is a relationship. It's not a mathematical relationship, but you can say that if I train every day, because now speaking as a coach, if players, they improve players.
You can go into that transition very quickly.
So players, they improve players. If I take Matthew and I put him to train in an amateur team, he will perform in a level. If we put him and we give time, as you said, in a pro team, his level will grow naturally because the environment will nurture the development of his qualities. So that's why I think one of the main reasons that you see the Saudi teams dominating the Asian football in the past 5 years.
Thank you.
I'd just like to let any agents know I am a free agent. If anybody thinks they'd like to put me in a good team, I'm open to negotiations.
Scouts, pay attention.
Signed off by Marcelo. Thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got another question.
Osman Altunterim, Moonstar Sports Agency. Sanırım translate yok ama siz yardımcı olursunuz diye düşünüyorum Kazım Bey.
Tabii, buyurun.
Birincisi şunu söyleyeceğim. Bir kere burada oldukları için teşekkür ediyorum. Kendi adıma da, organizasyon adına da, yani çok keyifli bir sohbet dinledik. İkincisi Çin konusuyla ilgili bir sanırım Fatih Bey'in bir konuşması oldu. O Çin'le hikayenin farklı olduğunu söyledi. Ama açık söyleyeyim, dışarıdan görünen pek farklı gözükmüyor. Yani Çin'de de benzer şeyi gördük biz. Çok yüksek paralarla çok iyi oyuncular bir anda getirildi. Açıkçası o da sanki şu anda yapılan gibi hükümetlerin bir imaj değişikliği politikası gibi algılanmıştı o dönem içinde. Şu anda da bu aynı şekilde böyle algılanıyor dünyanın birçok bölgesinde. Tabii ki bu imajı değiştirmek için daha farklı şeyler yapıyor. Bir şey Riyadh Season gibi organizasyonlar yapılıyor. Çok ciddi paralar ödeniyor ama günün sonunda bunun bir ölçü birimi olarak koyabilirsek şunu koyabilir miyiz? Mesela biz ne zaman dünyanın önde gelen kulüplerinde Suudi Arabistan menşeli, kökenli futbolcular göreceğiz? Burada bir hedef koyuyorlar mı kendilerine? Yani biz bu yatırımı yapıyoruz ama önümüzdeki 10 yıl içerisinde işte atıyorum Real Madrid'de bir Suudi oyuncu olacak, Everton'da bir oyuncumuz olacak, işte diğer liglerde olacak gibi bir şey var mı? Çünkü Çin'in çok daha yüksek bir insan kaynağı olmasına rağmen bunu başaramadı. Aynı şey Suudi Arabistan'da da olur diye düşünüyorum ben şahsi düşüncem olarak. Bunu söylemek istedim. Tekrar teşekkür ediyorum katılımları için.
Sorunuz kime?
Genel
olarak.
Cevaplamak isteyen kim varsa.
You might have found
Yani
a language that
Matthew,
Marcelo can't translate. It's the first time he ever feels like me. He's sat there going, I don't know what's going on.
I think we're 7 odd languages, but...
I mean, is it a question or is it a book?
Not yet,
That's what
not
I want to
yet.
know.
Well, the question is, there's a similarity between what the Chinese did and what the Saudi football is doing with regards to bringing in big names and then drawing attention and to be able to work from there. But is there a plan going forward, maybe in the next 10 years or so, where this plan goes into or transitions into homegrown players, where in the future Saudi Arabia expects to see homegrown players as superstars?
That was a question that came up in Jeddah and has been something that has been talked about a lot. Marcelo might know more on this. Does Saudi Arabia need to have an international player go and play for Barcelona, go to play for Manchester United, to showcase that they have the ability to do that? And I think it's very open because the Saudi player is really well supported in Saudi Arabia. And I was discussing this earlier today to say that there are certain countries and organizations where the player playing international football, it would be financially viable for them to leave that country and go to Manchester United. But in Saudi, I think that with culture and families and heritage being a key point, when you talk to the international players, I think there might be an aspiration to want to go and play for one of the big clubs, but they're so well looked after that I don't think there's the same drive to do that and to go into the development of players. And I think Marcelo has said it today, is that we're probably seeing in Saudi Arabia, in the model we're currently doing, we're developing players faster now than we were 4 or 5 years ago by having these inspirational figures. But I'm sure these two gentlemen can allude more to that.
Fatih, would you like to answer that question as well for us?
Well, yes, for sure. I can elaborate a bit, maybe not more expertise as you, but yes. From a perspective, the national vision is to empower the national team and to have it for the national team. Mm-hmm. To achieve this, you need to develop the club to have a strong national team. And as part of this, to have players playing abroad, that really needs a development from very low levels. And this, Marcelo spoke about that we have a national team for each age group to have the football identity from very early stages until the first team, so the player can develop, can have like 360 view development until reaching the national team. And then for this journey, of course, you will reach in a long term by having identity in the DNA. On a long term, for sure, in 5-6 years, the performance will be much more better. So there will be, of course, the door will be open for joining a European.
Naturally,
the identity are coming really
as it develops. Naturally, you will get homegrown players that will get it better and better and better and better.
What do you think about controlling players, though? You've got experience globally. Like, my thoughts is, because I can come from a rugby background now, right? Sorry to change the forum. I know everyone loves football. I'll try and always get rugby in somewhere, all right? Is that we talk about central contracts quite a lot, and controlling the athlete, right? So if you've got an international player and they're traveling away all the time, it's quite hard to control that player from an international level. So I don't know, is it easier in Saudi because these boys are playing for local clubs, they can be pulled into camps and sent back, than if these players were in Manchester United or Barcelona? What do you think from the Saudi side?
Talk about the pro guys. I think everybody in the room knows the data is available everywhere, regardless where you play. You can get information through network and through softwares as well. But what you said about the willingness of the players going abroad, I don't add and I don't take anything. It's exactly as it is. We already have superstars because the Saudis that they play for us, for Etihad, for Ahli, for Hilal, they are superstars in the country. They go to restaurants and they're followed by pictures and wherever. And that's it. So, and I'm sure they have the level to play now. The players that are serving national team, the Saudi national team today, they have level to play abroad.
But
even in
they
big
choose
teams,
not to.
The thing is, do they want or do they need?
Yeah.
That's the thing. But the level is there. The level is there.
not-
Football, if you talk only about football, but
Yeah.
now you have to think reverse of what I said. If I bring a foreigner to play in Saudi,
Yeah.
I have to take care of his family, everything. But if I have a Saudi to play abroad,
Yeah.
okay, doesn't he have...
Sometimes
the
culture
atmo-
comes into it as well. Not every superstar wants to go and play abroad. You know, they're happy playing where they are. They're happy with their families, and they choose not to.
Yeah, if you take women's football in Saudi Arabia and you look at the recruitment and the growth of that, that is exponential. The women's team now have made the top 100 in FIFA. You know, things are moving forward. When you're doing recruitment, it's very, very hard to move a female athlete from Jeddah away from their family over to the Eastern Province or vice versa. So that's just a little bit of a snippet of how important family and culture
Culture
is
is
to
in
these
Saudi
players.
Arabia,
And
yes.
as I say, if they're supported in the country, what are you going away for? But it's a really good question and something that I think
Thank
that
you.
we talk
Thank
about. It's a
you.
really good question.
Well, I think our time is up. Thank you very much to all three of you for making the journey, long journey here. And I'm Marcelo.
China, man. It's come from China.
Marcelo, 2 days ago you were in China, from there to Saudi Arabia, and you still joined us. Thank you very much to all
you.
three of you for coming and being with
Thank
us
you
today.
as well. Thank you so
very
much.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you to
Thank you for
everyone,
all of you.
and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much to Marcelo Salazar, Matthew Williams, Kazım Şengül, and Fatih Abdülkader. We are going to be continuing Winter League panels in the fourth day tomorrow morning at 9:30, and hope you are going to be joining us with the new panels. Thanks a lot and good evening.
Are we picturing up?
Yeah.